Have you ever been completely certain someone wasn't interested in you, only to realize later that the signs had been there all along? It happens more often than most people think. One of the biggest reasons is that genuine attraction rarely follows the version we see in movies or on social media. Instead of dramatic confessions or obvious flirting, it often reveals itself through quiet patterns that are easy to overlook in the moment. What if the signals you've been overlooking are the very ones that matter most? Today, we'll explore 5 subtle psychological behaviors that may reveal someone has deeper feelings for you, even when their actions seem confusing or difficult to read. By the final sign, you may find yourself looking back at certain people and certain moments in a completely different way. One of the earliest signs is that they begin making room for you in their future without drawing attention to it. Instead of trying to impress you with grand gestures, they casually include you when talking about plans, upcoming events, or experiences they'd like to have someday. It might sound like an ordinary conversation, but your presence keeps appearing in the picture they imagine. Psychologists who study close relationships have found that when someone becomes emotionally significant, the brain naturally starts including that person in future mental simulations. This process often happens before people fully recognize their own emotions, because the mind is constantly predicting and rehearsing future experiences. When someone repeatedly appears in those mental rehearsals, it often reflects a growing emotional investment rather than a random habit. Of course, one passing comment isn't enough to draw conclusions. Context always matters, and people plan differently depending on their personality. But if they consistently picture you in moments that haven't happened yet, it may suggest you're becoming part of how they naturally imagine the future. Sometimes what seems like casual conversation is actually a quiet glimpse into the place you've started to occupy in someone else's mind. Another behavior often slips under the radar because it doesn't look dramatic from the outside. Picture yourself in a busy room where several conversations are happening at once. People are talking over each other, checking their phones, or waiting for a chance to speak. Yet whenever you begin sharing something, one person's attention seems to settle on you almost effortlessly. They don't simply hear your words. They stay with your ideas, remember details you mentioned earlier, and respond in ways that show they were genuinely engaged instead of just being polite. From the perspective of cognitive psychology, this makes sense. Human attention is a limited resource. Every moment, the brain filters enormous amounts of information, deciding what deserves focus and what can safely be ignored. Emotional importance changes that filter. When someone becomes personally meaningful, the brain naturally assigns greater value to information connected with them, making it easier to notice, process, and remember what they say. This is why it's worth asking yourself a different question. Instead of wondering how often someone looks at you, ask whether they consistently make you feel heard. Eye contact can be intentional, but genuine attention is much harder to fake over time. People may look at many faces during the day, but they rarely invest sustained mental focus in someone who means very little to them. When you notice this pattern appearing again and again, it can reveal far more than a quick glance ever could. There's another clue that many people completely overlook because they're searching in the wrong moment. Instead of watching what happens during the conversation, pay attention to what happens after it ends. Do they seem lighter than before? Do they leave with more energy, continue smiling without realizing it, or appear unusually relaxed after spending time with you? Even when the interaction itself feels ordinary, the emotional effect sometimes lingers long afterward. Neuroscience offers an interesting explanation. Positive social experiences activate parts of the brain associated with reward, motivation, and emotional reinforcement. When spending time with someone repeatedly creates those positive internal experiences, the brain gradually begins associating that person with feelings of comfort, enjoyment, or anticipation. Without consciously deciding to, people become more motivated to seek those interactions again because the experience itself has become rewarding. That's why words aren't always the best place to look for answers. Instead, notice whether your presence seems to leave a lasting emotional imprint. Someone may never openly admit how much they enjoy being around you, yet their mood, energy, and desire to reconnect can quietly reveal what they're still trying to understand themselves. Sometimes the strongest evidence isn't found in what people say while they're with you. It's reflected in how they carry that interaction with them after you've gone your separate ways. As attraction begins to deepen, curiosity usually changes as well. Early conversations tend to revolve around everyday topics like work, hobbies, favorite shows, or how the day went. But when someone starts developing stronger feelings, the questions often become more thoughtful. They become interested in what shaped your personality, the values that guide your decisions, the experiences that changed your perspective, or the dreams you're quietly working toward. The goal is no longer just to keep a conversation going, it's to understand the person behind the conversation. Relationship researchers have consistently found that emotional closeness grows through gradual self-disclosure. As trust increases, people naturally become more interested in each other's inner world rather than surface-level facts. This shift isn't driven by curiosity alone. It's often motivated by a desire to build a more accurate picture of who the other person really is. Understanding someone's beliefs, motivations, and life experiences helps create a stronger emotional connection because the brain begins replacing assumptions with genuine knowledge. There's an important distinction worth remembering. Friendly people usually enjoy talking with many different people. Someone who is becoming emotionally invested often listens for the details that make you different from everyone else. They don't just ask what you do, they become interested in why you do it. They aren't collecting information simply to keep the conversation alive. They're slowly building a deeper understanding of your identity. This is also why these conversations often feel different. Instead of ending with small talk, they leave you feeling genuinely seen. You may walk away realizing they asked a question nobody else has asked before or remembered something deeply personal that you mentioned weeks ago without thinking much of it. Those moments create a sense of emotional recognition, and psychology suggests that feeling understood is one of the strongest foundations for developing close relationships. Of course, curiosity by itself doesn't automatically mean romantic attraction. Some people are naturally interested in others, while certain professions encourage thoughtful conversations every day. That's why context always matters. But when someone's curiosity consistently moves beyond facts and begins exploring who you are beneath the surface, it may be revealing a connection that's becoming much more personal than either of you has openly acknowledged. The final sign is one of the easiest to miss because it happens so quickly that most people never realize it's taking place. Imagine you're both with a group of friends when something unexpected happens. Someone shares exciting news. A joke makes everyone laugh at once, or an unforgettable moment suddenly unfolds. Before they consciously think about it, their attention drifts toward you. They're looking for your reaction, almost as if the experience doesn't feel complete until they've seen how you respond.
Social neuroscience provides an interesting explanation for this behavior. During emotionally meaningful moments, the brain naturally seeks connection with people who hold special importance. This process happens automatically because humans are wired to share emotional experiences with those they feel closest to. Researchers sometimes refer to this as social referencing, the tendency to look toward trusted or emotionally significant people when interpreting situations or sharing emotional reactions. While this behavior isn't exclusive to romantic attraction, it becomes especially meaningful when it repeatedly centers on the same person across different situations. Think about how often this happens without anyone saying a word. A room full of people is reacting, yet their attention briefly settles on you before returning to everyone else. It lasts only a second, but those seconds can reveal habits that are difficult to manufacture. Unlike rehearsed compliments or carefully chosen messages, these automatic reactions leave very little time for conscious control. That's exactly why they can be so revealing. Of course, it's important not to judge anyone based on a single moment. Human behavior is influenced by personality, friendship, culture, and countless other factors. One sign on its own rarely tells the full story. Psychology works by recognizing patterns, not isolated events. The more consistently these behaviors appear together over weeks or months, the more meaningful they become. Looking at the complete picture will almost always give you a more reliable answer than focusing on one interaction in isolation. Perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. Attraction usually doesn't reveal itself through dramatic speeches or perfect movie moments. It quietly appears in repeated decisions, unconscious habits, and small behaviors that most people dismiss as ordinary. Once you begin noticing those patterns instead of searching for obvious signals, you may discover that genuine interest has been present much longer than you ever realize. A person's feelings are rarely revealed all at once. More often, they emerge through small choices repeated over time, where attention naturally goes, whose opinion carries extra weight, who becomes part of someone's future thinking, and whose presence quietly shapes another person's emotional state. That's why the clearest answer is almost never found in one dramatic moment. It's found in a pattern that remains consistent even when nobody is trying to make an impression. The more you understand these psychological patterns, the less you'll rely on guesswork and the more you'll recognize that genuine attraction often communicates itself long before it's ever spoken aloud. People can choose their words carefully, but they have far less control over the habits their minds create. Sometimes the strongest emotions aren't the ones people openly confess. They're the ones their everyday behavior reveals without permission. So before you decide that someone feels nothing, ask yourself one final question. Have you been listening to their words? Or have you been paying attention to their patterns? Because in the end, people don't always reveal who matters most through what they say. More often, they reveal it through what they do, again and again, until the answer has been there all along.